We're going to get started with some quick announcements. First, I just wanted to share next month we have our annual awards banquet that we were going to have in March. As many of you may remember, we have some great projects and people we're really ready to recognize, and with no in-person meeting date on the books yet, we decided to go virtual and have a virtual award ceremony with some interactive elements. There will be some trivia and some raffle prizes, so it should be really a fun event. It is going to take place over the lunch hour, so I really hope that you and maybe your teams can join. Some really great projects, again, that we're going to be learning about on the Central Coast. And then Jennifer, do you want to go ahead and take over?
Sure. Can you guys all see me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. Just going back and forth between my screens. Hi, everyone. Thank you guys for attending the APWA Central Coast chapter panel today. I heard some of your intro, Amy, but also just wanted to acknowledge that Crosby Investment Group is a gold sponsor, and they're sponsoring our meeting today. Crosby Investment Group holds the belief that the interests of the client must always come first. Their business has grown from referrals by serving our clients and local communities with a high quality of customer service, and their objective is to make the planning, investments, and retirement process simple and understandable. So thank you very much for your sponsorship today. And with that, one more thing also, I don't think Amy mentioned, we do have some open positions on our Central Coast chapter board. We have our membership chair, our communications chair, social media chair, and webmaster. So if you're interested in joining our board, please reach out to any of the board members. And with that, we can go ahead and I'll introduce to you the panelists that we have on today's meeting. From the City of Carpinteria, we have John Alawson, who's the Public Works Director. The City of Santa Barbara, we have Brian Demore, who's the Acting Public Works Director. We have Scott McLaughlin from the County of Santa Barbara. He's the Director of Public Works. Doug Pike, who's from the City of Greenfield, and he's a contract city engineer. Matt Vanderlinden from the City of Solvang, and he's the Director of Public Works. And then Ben Fine from the City of Pismo, and he is also their Director of Public Works. So I'm gonna quickly check with Amy. Did Leroy already go over how to ask questions and all of that?
No, I haven't yet.
Okay, well, I can go ahead and cover that then. Just as we move through the questions for our panelists, go ahead and if you have any questions throughout, just submit it in your chat box, and then we'll be monitoring those questions throughout the meeting, and then at various times we'll open it up to members to be able to ask those questions and get the responses from our panelists. So thank you to our panelists for being here today, and I'm going to start off with some questions, and I think the way we're going to do it is I'll ask the question and then we'll give all of the panelists an opportunity to address that question, because we'd like to hear from all of you on these important topics. So the first question that I want to ask, and we'll start with John Alawson from the City of Carpinteria. What is the condition of your local infrastructure, and what are your top 3 priority projects for 2021?
Is this like a lightning round? Do I have a certain time limit?
I think you can keep it to 2 to 3 minutes, but
Okay.
We're very interested though also. So yeah, around 3 minutes would be great.
Okay, it'll probably be less. So the first question I hear, well, first of all, thank you, Amy, for inviting me. This is actually my first California Central Coast chapter meeting. I am part of APWA, but this is my first time, but thank you for the invitation. So I'm actually honored to be here. So the questions are, what is the condition of your local infrastructure, and what are your top 3 priority projects for 2021? like for the condition of our local infrastructure, if I were to use the ASCE grading, I guess, so to say, I would say a solid D plus. I don't know, so I can't really sugarcoat that for Carpenteria's infrastructure. But well, first of all, is anybody from the Carpenter Valley Water District online? Because I'm going to say something bad about them right now. That's, the city of Carpenteria doesn't have its own water or sewer, but I can only really speak to on the roadway and storm drain system of our city. I'd like to say maybe, yeah, like I said, probably condition-wise, ASCE type grading would be like a D plus. Water and sewer, the general managers of those districts could definitely have another opinion about that, but not to get into their utilities or facilities. But overall, I like to say, based on my working with those districts as well, that would be our local condition of our infrastructure, around C minus, D plus. My opinion, of course. In regards to top 3 priority project for 2021, we're going to continue on with resurfacing our roadways, taking advantage of Senate Bill 1 money. We also have a local measure tax that was passed in 2018, so that helped us a lot. So definitely pavement projects, pedestrian improvement projects, alternative transportation. So that's what our priorities are in this city. Thank you.
Gotta unmute, Jennifer.
There we go. Thank you. I have kids in the background, so it's possible they're screaming, so I have to mute in between. But we'll move on to Brian next from the city of Santa Barbara.
All right, thank you. So I'll use a slightly less technical methodology. I would just say that the condition of our local infrastructure is okay. Obviously, we're an older city. We've got a lot of old infrastructure. We also, we have our own water, wastewater. We also have waterfront and an airport. We've got a dam on the other side of the mountains here. So we have a lot of different types of infrastructure, and it's all different ages. I think the key thing is that I think we're at a point now where we're kind of holding steady on the deferred maintenance backlog. So that's kind of a nice thing. I think there's always going to be a backlog, but when you see that it continues to grow year after year, that's a problem. But between our local measure C and then just reprioritizing water main replacement, those are some of the key. Measure C, we're focusing a lot on streets, so we're kind of able to keep up with that backlog, and then the focus on the water main replacement has been really helpful. So that kind of rolls into the priority projects I mentioned: water main, pavement maintenance, and then there's a big project that's in design at our wastewater treatment plant for electrical upgrades, which sounds like a simple thing until you start thinking about it, and then all of a sudden the $20 million plus price tag doesn't seem too unreasonable. But that's a humongous project that we've got in the works, in design right now. And then there are a bunch of projects related to this water sales agreement, or at least the urgency to get moving on them is now higher with our water sales agreement between us and Montecito Water District. So there's pipeline work, some pumping work that needs to happen, a bunch of things to get those connections where we need them to be to deliver water, not only to Montecito, but to our customers as well, with South being a big piece of our water supply. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And we'll move on to Scott from the County of Santa Barbara.
Thank you, Jennifer, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me today. This is a great question because local infrastructure is certainly what we do. And when I look across, our county public works department, looking specifically across our three largest divisions, transportation, resource recovery and waste management, as well as flood control. On the transportation side, we've been constructing a document we call the Road Maintenance Annual Plan since 1994, and we use that document to educate the public, our board, and anyone who's interested in our road system on the condition of the road system. We have about 1,700 lane miles of roads across an area, maybe twice the size of Rhode Island, if you will. And on the PCI side, we're at a 56. John mentioned SB1. That's certainly been a shot in the arm. That's been helping us a bit. But when you look at the actual unfunded need, we look at it across 5 components, and pavement's one of those components. We have about a $310 million unfunded need right now. So Kristen and his team are chipping away at that, using some of that new revenue coming in creative ways and looking for new technologies. We recently just did a pilot project down in Montecito, and I think a few folks on this call attended. So we always try to find creative technologies that are out there that can be done in a cost-effective way to get these roads treated. So on the transportation side, one of the big projects we have next year is our last seismic retrofit, the Florida Avenue Bridge, which is just outside the city of Lompoc. So that's going to be a big one for us, and it's on our radar. On the resource recovery and waste management side, I mean, we run that like a business because it's an enterprise fund. We have 2 major projects going there. One should be going into warm commissioning here shortly, and that's the resource center out at Tahigas landfill. $150 million project, material recovery facility, and an anaerobic digester. So it's effectively going to change the way we deal with waste in the Tahigas waste shed for the next generation or so, we hope. And also up at Laguna Sanitation, which is part of resource recovery and waste management, we're going to be commencing construction on phase 1, essentially rebuilding our wastewater treatment plant. And we're going to be working with M&S on that. So big deal for us. On the flood control side, everybody remembers the debris flow in Montecito. We've pretty much reconstructed most of those channels and basins out there. We have a new piece of infrastructure that we're going to be building, hopefully with FEMA's help. And that's the Randall Road debris basin. So that hopefully should be starting once we get into the new year. We're in the transitioning now into the real property phase. So that'll be a significant piece of infrastructure we add to our flood control system, and hopefully protects the community for years to come. So, thank you.
Great, thank you. And we'll move on to Doug. And I do want to just repeat the question just in case anyone came in late. So Doug, what is the condition of your local infrastructure? And then what are your top 3 priority projects for 2021?
I'll be direct and brief. Our emphasis right now is on water and wastewater. We're updating our water and wastewater master plans and our wastewater treatment plant master plan. And we're currently dealing with about $500 million in new development here that's in process, and a total of about $1 billion in development that's out there in inquiry and purchasing of opportunities and properties and so forth. We have the Yanks Air Museum, for example. We have about 1,500 new housing units coming in. And this is a town with a population of about 19,000. And so the city had to do some hustling to keep up with the last boom, 2004 to 2006. And we're seeing something that's unprecedented in this development boom, and it hasn't really slowed down with the COVID-19. But we're working ahead, looking at funding. Because Greenfield is a economically disadvantaged city, it's easier for us to find matching funds to go along with state revolving fund loans. And we're enrolled in several programs that have allowed us to get access to those funds at a better rate than maybe other communities. And so we're looking ahead, getting early information from the master planning and developing a strategy to move forward. We're also expecting new orders from the regional board regarding our wastewater treatment plant, and we're planning so that we can accommodate that as well as the increased flows. So that's the main emphasis in Greenfield right now.
Great, thanks, Doug. And Matt, how about in the city of Solvang?
Yeah, hi, Jennifer, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. So our infrastructure it's a mixed bag. Solvang's a full service city. We provide water and wastewater service. So we just finished, last year we finished our first ever storm drain master plan, and we're happy to find our storm drain infrastructure is in pretty good shape. But our road infrastructure, I'd give it probably a C- or a D grade, maybe D+. And our water and wastewater infrastructure, maybe a C+ grade. So things are fair, but and it kind of varies within each system. We have some new facilities and some, older facilities. But anyway, so our top 3 projects coming up. The first one is a major $15 to $16 million upgrade of our wastewater treatment plant. And so that we're in the design phase, or in design of phase 1 of that project. The project has 3 phases, and we're getting ready to go out to bid here in a week or 2 on the first phase. And then the second major project for us coming up is our South Alisal Road pavement reconstruction project. So Alisal Road is one of the arterials, maybe like a minor arterial that goes in and out of Solvang. And we have about 1.7 miles of that road that we're going to be reconstructing. And that project is under design right now, and the construction will begin in summer of 2021. Another project that's in design right now is phase 2 of our 2nd Street drainage improvements. And that project will also go into construction in summer 2021. And that project includes our first major trash capture facility that the city will be implementing. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. And city of Pismo Beach, Ben, what have you got going on there?
So as far as the condition of our infrastructure, it's all over the place. If you look at our water, wastewater, streets, some of it's in great shape and some of it's been around, for 75 years, 80 years. We just wrapped up our Shell Beach Streetscape project, and basically we took all of our paving money for the last, 3 years and put it into that project. So what we're doing right now is we're doing a pavement management plan update, and we're having all of the streets evaluated, and there's a company that's coming through with a reflectometer that drives it with this trailer and measures the condition of the roads, and they're going to put together for us our plan moving forward on what streets get paved when. Typically, we like to pave neighborhoods. We don't want to pave one street in a neighborhood now. I mean, most cities do this and then come back and disrupt the neighborhood again in a couple of years. So they group the projects. Usually we're such a small city. We do about $2 million a year in paving. We just wrapped up our Pismo Pier Plaza project. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's absolutely amazing. Have a slide from the promenade to the beach, which is pretty cool. Our focus moving forward will be paving, and then also we went out to bid for a solids handling project. We were going to replace our belt press with a screw press and had a number of other things in there, and bids came in about $2.5 million over budget. And so what we've decided to do is pull back on that, and we're going to rehab our belt press And then with the remaining money that we budgeted, we're going to do some improvements at the courtyard to make that facility more functional. And most of that work will be done by city crews. So we're looking forward to getting that done. And that's a snapshot of Pismo Beach. Oh, sorry, Central Coast Blue. How can I leave that out? We're actually wrapping up the EIR for Central Coast Blue. It's a regional recycled water project. Pismo Beach, Grover Beach, Arroyo Grande, participating in that together. Pismo Beach is the lead agency. So we are about to drill a test injection well. That got appealed to the County Board of Supervisors. So we need to go to that hearing on the 20th. We anticipate an appeal to the Coastal Commission. And once the appeals get settled out, we'll drill a test injection well and be able to actually measure how the basin responds to having water injected into it. So we anticipate construction on that project end of 21.
Great. So it sounds like 2021 is going to be an exciting year for water and wastewater. But it's exciting to see that we're definitely not slowing down at all in public works and utilities. There's a lot of, bridges, pavement management, all of that still happening and going strong. So that's very exciting. Moving on to the second question, and we'll stick with the same order for the responses. Are you seeing any reduction in federal aid repair to your infrastructure? And if so, how are you making your current budgets work? So John, we'll start with you.
Yes, funding. Fortunately, the city of Carpenter doesn't rely too much on federal aid funding, and it's all because of local local sales tax measures. In Carpenter, it's we call it Measure X. Of course, there's Measure A, Senate Bill 1 money. It doesn't mean that we don't apply for federal aid monies. We actually have one HBP, Highway Bridge Program funds. We are trying to go after Highway Safety Improvement Program funds. I'm working on the city's local roadway safety plan, which is basically a prerequisite to apply for HSIP funding. ATP money, we're always trying to go after ATP, Active Transportation Program. So please, if Fred Luna, if you're on the line, please vote for our project. This is a marketing campaign as well. The second part of that project, how are we making our current budget work? Well, it was this past fiscal year's budget workshop in the city was tough. There was a lot of cuts from the Public Works Department that were hard decisions by our city manager, Dave Durflinger. And amongst those are equipment cuts to outdated equipment, position, a civil engineer position that was cut and not budgeted anymore. So yes, we are affected by this pandemic, but like I mentioned, fortunately, we do have local sales tax measures, Measure A in particular, Measure X that I just mentioned, and of course the state aid funding. So that's how we are trying to work things out over here.
Great, thank you. And Brian, what kind of financial challenges are you having in the city of Santa Barbara?
Yeah, so fortunately, we don't rely too much on the federal aid, and similar to what John said with some of the bridge stuff. We were fortunate to kind of get ahead of the curve on the bridge replacement work while there was a lot of federal funding available for the bridge program. So we're in pretty good shape on that. So more COVID related, that's impacting all of our programs in slightly different ways, but it has certainly impacted every one of them in some way. And the timing of COVID and the budget process made it really difficult to put together a 2021 budget. We basically had it all packaged up, ready to go. And then this all started happening. So there wasn't even time really to try to make accurate estimations for 21 revenue. And even still, here we are, we've now completed 1/4 of fiscal year 21, and there's still a tremendous amount of uncertainty on what the revenue picture is going to look like at the end of the year. So we're trying to be as careful as we can, but we don't want to panic and pull everything back. So what the city did, at least for general fund related activities, we tried to do a 5% reduction across the board on expenses. And we're just keeping as close of an eye as we can on revenue, and hopefully can make adjustments if we need to make further cuts, or if we're able to resume if we feel like things are headed back to normal. And I would say that so far so good. We're kind of on track with that 5% cut that we had built into the budget, but there's still so much unknown. It's probably the most difficult budget year anyone's really ever seen.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, I think we probably all feel that same way about the budget challenges, right? At the same time that the COVID response had to happen was when we were all planning on taking our budgets to council, and we all had to adjust those. So definitely can understand that. Let's move on to Scott for the County of Santa Barbara. What kind of reductions have you guys seen in federal aid, if any, and how are you making your budgets work?
Sure, thanks. And I think you're going to hear a common theme probably from all the public sector folks here on the COVID impacts. It's just, you know, it's unfortunate because SB1, it took a few years to ramp up, and we're pretty much at 100%. And all of a sudden, boom, we have COVID and we have the stay-at-home orders, and we've seen that reduction across the board. So we're all managing that. Unfortunately, I'm being told that there's no opportunity through the CARES Act. Perhaps one of the federal packages that gets approved in the future might have something in there to replace some of that revenue specifically, but because we're banking on SB1 to make some progress on our transportation system. So, what I've always found on the federal side is the federal money usually is project specific, right? So we all deal with state gas taxes, which are subvented directly to us. So, and so is SB1 now to some degree, and then certainly project specific monies. But what we've been trying to do at the federal level now is to try to get some traction there to get dedicated funding to cities and counties across America at using some formula. So a lot like state gas taxes coming to us. So, we've been involved at the federal level with some of the reauthorization energy that's going on there. The House T&I just put out their proposed plan for the federal reauthorization, and it included larger line items for dedicated funding to local agencies, but they're not quite at the subvention level yet, because everyone gets kind of wrapped up with the existing formulas that are there, and no one wants to change those formulas because they've been around for 4 or 5 decades. So we're continuing to work on that. The other thing that I think we should all be concerned with is the long-term health of the trust fund. And California, our politicians, they made the tough decision on SB1, and they raised gas taxes because gas taxes hadn't been changed since 1994. Well, the same thing is true on the federal side as well. They haven't adjusted gas taxes since then as well. And if you think about it, in California, before they raised gas taxes, we had lost 60% of our buying power. So now we get that back to some degree, and without the COVID impacts. But they also put a COLA in there in the future, and I think they adjust that every 3 years. So hopefully going forward, we won't lose buying power. But I think it's all incumbent upon us to work with our federal delegation to really kind of get them over the hump, if you will, to make the tough call on raising federal gas taxes. The House T&I version of the federal reauthorization came out with a lot of discussion and study funding, I think, for VMT, because I think we all need to realize that SB1 really is kind of a 10 or 20 year patch, if you will, because as we see more hybrid vehicles and we see more electric vehicles, the governor just had an executive order, was it last week or the week before, by 2035, all vehicles that get sold in California are going to be electric. Well, there's going to be gas taxes coming in. So we need to start thinking about that now, on what SB1 becomes in the future, because when they're not selling cars that run on fossil fuels here, we're gonna have to figure out another funding source. And state gas taxes, federal gas taxes are the lion's share of our budget. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. And let's hear from Doug next.
I'll try not to be repetitive. Many of the things that have been expressed are similar in our situation. We do rely mostly on state funds and very little on federal funds. What's a little unique about our situation is Greenfield jumped in early. They're very progressive city council and community development department. And so Greenfield, there's been large developments in medical cannabis. We've got about 20 acres under roof of high-end, high-tech grow operations. And we have the world's most advanced extraction facility here in Greenfield that employs about 140 people. And the revenues from that we realize are actually very real and has made a big difference to lessen the brunt of what's happened from COVID-19. Plus the city had a comfortable amount of reserves that have helped keep things afloat. Up in this area in South Monterey County, a lot of things are back to normal. Everybody, for example, I'm in City Hall and everybody's here. It's an essential facility and most businesses are open. The schools are still virtual and many of the same things that we see. I live in Santa Barbara County, and so it's a lot of things are similar. Other thing is that in the last big economic cycle, when the housing stock more than doubled, we adopted the policy of requiring maintenance assessment districts, streets and storm drains, lighting and landscaping. And so all the housing stock from that era, the 2004 to 2006, pay their own way for streets maintenance and lighting and all the green spaces and storm drainage and all the rest. And all the new housing stock also is being required to vote themselves into these maintenance assessment districts. And that's been a big boon because it's lessened the burden. Also, because we're the epicenter of development in this region, the impact fees have accumulated, and that is going to fund about half of our water infrastructure needs that are coming up. And the rest will be by matched loans from the SRF. And then the wastewater treatment plant, there's programs that we're applying for now through the state. We get, like I mentioned before, some favorable rates and opportunities. One big boon has been consolidation program incentive loans. And some of, I think the other public works directors and professionals are familiar with this. If you have surrounding communities with bad water and your city or your entity is the only one that can provide it, then the state looks to the city to sponsor the applications and they will fund all the improvements. And if you do that and go through the pain of an SRF loan, and those that have done it know what I'm talking about, then they give you an incentive of 50% match on infrastructure loans. And so we're looking for creative ways. We do have a half-cent sales tax measure that goes a long way. And so we're stretching, and funding's always an issue. So we're always going for the competitive funds. But like everybody else, money's the thing.
Yep, thank you, Doug. And move on to Matt.
Sure. Well, similar to the county of Santa Barbara, Solvang usually is receiving federal aid for specific projects. So we don't receive any routine federal aid except for operation of the San Ynez Valley Transit. We receive Federal Transportation Administration 5311 funding for operating our rural transit system here. But so So yeah, we haven't really seen much change because we normally don't get much federal aid except for those, specific projects. But as far as just our budget and managing capital improvements and the impact of the coronavirus, of course, we we had to make some cuts in our budget because of the COVID-19, and we've deferred a few projects. There were a few projects that were kind of popular, desirable community projects, but without but they weren't high priority projects. So there's a few projects that actually got canceled. Yes, we're just trying to be innovative and creative in implementation of our projects and try to be clever in how we do things and stretch the funds that we have available. So there's nothing magic about it, but we're just trying to stretch the dollars as best we can and prioritizing the project. So that's basically it.
Thanks, Matt. And then we'll move on to Ben.
You guys hear me? I'm having some problems hearing you.
Sorry about that. I'll repeat the question for you, Ben. So it's your turn. So we're on
I'm good.
Oh, sure.
So one of the I don't want to say it's a problem, but one of the problems working for the city of Pismo Beach is that we often don't qualify for a lot of the funding out there. We are by no means disadvantaged. We're such a small community that when we do qualify, we're often not competitive. We were successful with a bridge replacement project that is underway. But as far as federal funding and what the city can go after and get, it's pretty limited to the guarantee, the SB1, the fuel tax, stuff like that. So we don't really count on it. We do look towards, there's some disaster relief funding that we looked for, especially we had that fire back in June. But with COVID and everything else, we haven't seen any help or relief there. We pretty much don't count on it. And if we get it, great, but we don't count on it.
Sure, thanks. And so I do, one of the questions on the chat did come in a good follow-up question that I just want to pose to you, since we are talking about the financial aspect, and then our previous question was about our local infrastructure and maintaining that and everything. So a question that came in from David Athy, and not every panelist needs to respond, but if you're interested, please do. And the question is, as a society in general, we're really good at funding new projects. However, we're not so good at funding the maintenance of existing projects. What are your strategies for designing projects that are inexpensive to maintain, but still meet the council and the public's needs? Would any panelists like to take on that question?
Sure, I'll take a stab at that. So for starters, whenever we're designing a project, we're always thinking about the operations and maintenance costs, whether it's street improvements or water, wastewater improvements. So we're always having to focus really closely on that to make sure we're absolutely minimizing the operation and maintenance costs in the future. And one of the challenges that I have here in Solvang is to communicate disappointment to my city council at a rate that they can absorb. So what I'm getting at there is a lot of times the community wants something, the city council may want something, some improvements, but sometimes those improvements can't be done with the funds available. So, they're the ones that make the final decisions on priorities and budgets and so forth. But once they set a budget, you know, sometimes I have to go back to them and say, okay, this is the budget you set, and we can only do A and B. We can't do C and D, you know. So sometimes they just can't have everything they want. And so that's generally the two situations where we have to focus on minimizing the future maintenance costs, looking at all the aspects of the design. And then sometimes you just can't have everything you want, you know. You just have to simplify a project or whatever. So
Yeah, thanks, Matt. That's a great strategy. And then does any other panelists want to say what strategies you might be doing in your agencies to design those projects that are inexpensive to maintain?
Jennifer, I can take a run at it as well. I think it, you know, in more of a general way, because it's a good question. I mean, when we advocate for federal funding or state funding, one of the things that we talk about now is the fix it first philosophy, right? Because we have all this infrastructure, like in Santa Barbara County, a lot of developments were put in the 60s and 70s, and now these roads are requiring recycles or reconstructs because we just haven't had the funding to take care of them. So when we talk to state and federal elected officials, you know, our goal is to try to get them away from building new infrastructure and talk a little bit more about setting some money aside to help us fix existing infrastructure. You know, I mentioned the Higas Resource Center that's currently under construction. We were on a phone call yesterday with a collective of resiliency agencies. And one of the topics we brought up was the long-term operations and maintenance of it, because it's a green facility and the community feels good about being green and diverting as much waste as we can from the landfill, because this will get us close to 90% diversion once it's operating. But it's cost $30 million a year to operate. So we're trying to see if there's federal and state resources out there to help us on the O&M side, because right now the burden is with the ratepayers. So if we can bring in some outside funding to help us do that, it'd be great for the local residents that live here in Santa Barbara County.
Thanks, Scott and Matt, for tackling that question. It is interesting. I think you both had noted just, you know, it is challenging to have the conversation with the council and public about, well, maybe it's not a new, maybe you don't get the new project. Maybe we just, you know, fix it first and everything. And those are hard conversations to have sometimes. Yeah, I think being able to communicate that in a way that makes everyone happy is good.
yeah, if I could just add, so I mentioned we're doing this storm drain project, and this it's going to have this new trash capture structure. So we're in the process of looking at all kinds of different alternatives for the trash capture structure. But the capital cost is really kind of not the most important driving factor. The actual ongoing operations and maintenance of it is what we're looking at most critically and most closely. So you know, we've had our operations and field staff involved reviewing the different alternatives along with our engineering staff. But anyway, so that's just an example where we have to really look at the O&M costs. And we can't have a structure that's got all kinds of hinges and hatches that, you know, all kinds of moving parts and stuff. So we're trying to keep the number of moving parts to a minimum, keep the maintenance as simple as possible. The number of looking at all the different possible modes of failure for this trash capture structure, and keep selecting a structure that has the fewest modes of failure, the easiest maintenance, the easiest operation, and all that. So.
Thanks. All right, so moving on to our next question. So you've all shared some of the challenges and the importance of maintaining our infrastructure, and then the funding challenges that we've been having. So let's shift the focus to something a little more positive and talk a little about the more rewarding side of this profession. So for all of the panelists, and we'll start with John, looking back on your entire career, what has been your most favorite, most memorable project?
Wow, that's a good question. I haven't been around that long, actually. But I am. That's like actually a question to a parent. Who's your favorite kid? I mean, some parents probably could answer that, but oh gosh, my entire career, my favorite memorable project. I've been fortunate enough to been in agencies, even also as a consultant myself, working on different projects. So I do remember, if you ask me what agency, what project, I could tell you the particular thing that was favorite or memorable in that project in every agencies. I actually don't really have, I really can't pick one myself, but I like to say being in this public works director role is, for me, it's not just the engineering and construction part of the job. There's also the people part. And I'm not trying to get all philosophical on everybody on this, but some of my memorable assignments or tasks is coming into an agency and, how should I say, maybe improving the culture. Like I mentioned, I haven't been around that long, especially in a department head. But the agencies that I do go to, for whatever reason, has particular morale issues. And that, I would say, more, I guess you could call it a project for me. It's a project where it's an internal project that I do actually want to make better and improve. So, because when you have a good culture, when you have a culture of inclusion, collective input, you will have good engineering project, good more memorable construction projects, maintenance tasks. So it's a good question. It's one of the harder questions, believe it or not, that's to ask me. So that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, John. I think that's a wonderful answer, and it gives another perspective on it too. It's true, all of these projects that we're talking about, people and our colleagues are behind all of those. So I think that is a wonderful thing a wonderful project to look forward to and be excited about to improve that morale and the culture and everything. I think that's great. So let's move on to Brian. What's, looking back over your career, what's your most favorite or memorable project?
Yeah, well, first, before I jump into that, I want to say one thing about John Lawson. He used to work here for the city of Santa Barbara, and he left a very positive mark on us here and on our culture. So we really appreciated the time that you spent here. And it's really exciting to have you a little bit closer now at the city of Carpinteria. So looking forward to chatting with you now and then.
Okay, Brian, I could pay you my $100 now for
all right, no problem. But yeah, as far as projects, I think similar to John, it's hard to pick one. And I'm an achiever. So actually, when I was looking at this question, my answer was, it's the next one. My favorite project is always the next one. I just quickly turn the page and move on to the next one. It's kind of a problem with being an achiever. But because of that, I would say that I would pick the Modoc Las Placitas multi-use pathway because that's in construction right now. So that's kind of in the forefront of my mind. And I'm really excited about that as somebody who cycles all over town. It's going to be a great piece of infrastructure to have. So that's my current favorite, but it's soon to change.
Thanks, Brian. That's a great answer. I think I'll save that for like a job interview sometime. That sounded pretty enthusiastic. So, and let's move on to Scott.
Thanks, Jennifer. Like John and Brian, I kind of struggle with that one too. And I look over my career, there's been so many great projects that were, done by the team here at Public Works. And And I thought about it, and I think if I had to pick something, I'd pick kind of a program, if you will. And myself and my leadership team, I mean, our goal is to kind of have the most efficient department and best county public works department in the state, if not the nation. And we were looking around at our training programs, and about half of our department's field and half is office and technical staff. And what we found was we were doing a really good job making great operators and great technical people. And then when a leadership position would open up, we'd say, hey, you're a great operator, you're a great technician, now you're a leader, congratulations. So we'd pop them into a position with like no training at all. So it was really a sink or swim situation for those people. So we started to create a leadership development program, and we're going into our third version of it now. And the cadence is about every year and a half, 2 years. It got delayed a little bit because of COVID, but we're hoping we can kind of roll out 3.0 here in the next month or two, socially distanced, of course. So staff has been pretty receptive to it. So we're selecting staff that we think can succeed and lead this department in the future. So it's a big part of our succession plan. So it's like John focusing it on kind of the people. So, because, the leaders that are here today aren't going to be here tomorrow, but, a few years out, but we got to make sure that Public Works can succeed and carry on in the future. So I'd say it's our leadership development program.
That's great. Thanks, Scott. That's amazing. And Doug, how about you?
I love my profession. I love my career. And I've been doing this for about 40 years. And I guess the big projects brought the most variety. I had 10 years infrastructure on Vandenberg Air Force Base out of school, and had opportunity to do amazing things in the shuttle and Titan IV programs. I was even a harbor master for a while and had to dredge the harbor out there for barging operations, and had to learn all about setting targets for the tugboats and what their draft is and what mean low tide means and all the rest. I enjoyed 10 years at the city of Santa Barbara, and the infrastructure programs that I was involved with there, some large ones like the Carrillo Boulevard extension through to Cabrillo, the Cabrillo relinquishment, and a number of large projects out there. More recently, being the lead engineer for all the EIR implementation for a regional landfill for the city of Santa Maria. That was a wonderful 6-year project where we accomplished a lot of things, learned a lot about closing oil wells and what to do with oil wells you discover that weren't closed properly, and so forth. And then one of the interesting assignments I've had is for 18 years, I've been the engineer out at Twitchell Dam and Reservoir. And that's just kind of a work of affection and love, because it's a small district, and it doesn't, for a consultant, it doesn't pay well because there's not a lot of work, but it's a large earthen dam that is essential to the well-being of the Santa Maria Valley, not just providing clean water, but for its very existence depends on the maintenance and function of that dam, because the levee around Santa Maria doesn't work without the dam. And so I just love the fact that we're in a profession that makes a difference. Most people don't even know it. I try to tell my kids when you drive through a city, oh, I was involved in this and that, and they all get bored, and Dad, just stop talking. But it brings a lot of joy to my life to know that we're in the service of our community.
What an inspiring career that you've had. It's amazing. And so Matt, we'll move on to you, and we are at our 5-minute mark too, so not to cut you guys short, but just to give you a heads up. So Matt, what is your most favorite or memorable project?
Okay, I'll keep it brief. So I've been a registered civil engineer for many years, worked on quite a few really interesting projects, been fortunate in that way. But when I read that, 2 projects came to mind, actually both of them with my previous employer, who was Goleta Water District. And so there's 2 projects. One was the Patterson Reservoir Replacement Project. and we had an existing really old steel tank that was all corroded that we replaced with a pre-stressed concrete reservoir or tank. And the challenge on that was we needed to increase the storage capacity of the facility, and it was a really constrained site. So if I'm remembering correctly, we went from 2.5 million gallon reservoir up to a 3.2 million gallon reservoir. Anyway, so that was a really successful project that came to mind. And another one that was really interesting, Goleta Water District has a small hydropower plant at one of its reservoir sites. And I was involved in a project to rehabilitate that hydropower unit. And so that's the only time I've ever dealt with the hydropower facilities. So that was kind of memorable and unique. So that's it.
Great, thanks, Matt. And then Ben, we'll end with your most favorite or memorable project.
Unmute, can you hear me? So definitely I agree with the comment made about the staff. You know, a motivated, appreciated staff will do more work and achieve more than any other combination of people you can put together. You can put together the most talented people in the world, but if they don't feel appreciated and they don't feel valued, they're not going to produce for you. So that's definitely, you know, something that I've strived for to build. We have a culture here in Pismo. We call it "'Cause We're Pismo." And every year we have a day that we set aside and the employee family gets together and we reinforce that culture. We have a training video that we show. It's actually a video on our culture, and I show it to every new hire and make sure that they understand what they're getting into. We don't like to hire people who on their lunch break want to go sit by themselves. We want people to interact with each other and build bonds outside of the workplace. As far as actual tangible projects, I've only been the director of public works since late 2012. And in that time, we have completely rebuilt our pier. We have completely redone our pier plaza, and we have completed the Shell Beach Streetscape project. All of these projects, to complete any one of them in a career would be amazing, and to do them all within that short of a time, you know, the comment was made, pick your favorite child. You can't really do that. But those three projects have had such an impact to our community and improved the quality of life for our residents so much that I just feel very fortunate to be a part of them. Our city council has a vision for our city, and you know, they set it out. I just carry it out. So the city council had this vision that they wanted constructed, that they wanted built. I was fortunate enough to be in this chair at the right time and to implement them. And it's, you know, it's been an honor of a lifetime to watch these projects completely transform our downtown. And, you know, hats off to my crew, you know, Eric Eldridge, my senior engineer, he led the charge on most of these projects. Yeah, so that's what I would say is in addition to the staff, those three projects.
Great. Thank you all so much. Since we're coming up against the end of the hour, I do just want to thank all of you very much for being here today. I think we've all learned some really inspiring things, and then also hopefully have taken back some pieces of, you know, ways to improve our own cultures and just moving forward in this interesting time of COVID, and maybe some strategies for funding and maintaining our projects. So thank you so much. Round of applause to the panelists. And with that, I think the meeting ends at 1. So I think with that, we can go ahead and call it good.
Great, thank you, Jennifer.
So yeah, thank you so much. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for attending.
I think if anybody has questions, they can feel free to email any of the panelists.
Perfect. Thank you.